Let's get it started.
Double O.
Free range, motherfucker. Yep. And we're back, Free Range Podcast, and we have the lovely Nicole Plantin on here, fresh out the gig.
Yes, fresh out of
work.
Yeah. Long day. But
thank you for coming.
But I'm gonna keep it.
We
keep
got
it
the coffee.
going.
We're doing all right.
Yeah.
We're doing all right.
Get a dose of needed some caffeine.
Yeah. Can you sleep after at this late? Like if you drink coffee this late?
I don't know because I rarely do it, so I don't know how that normally goes down. But I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't thinking about what's gonna happen in 3 hours. I was more so thinking, okay, I'm about to go and have a podcast and.
Well, I never know how your days roll because you are one of the busiest people that I know, and it's just like you might have. Tweets from the office, and then next thing you know, you're in the studio, and then you have to hit the club, and then rinse and repeat.
There's nothing happening. By the way, no, I don't know where you see the club posts.
I don't see the club, but I did see you last in the club.
Or any signs of a club.
I did see you last in the club for your birthday.
For my birthday. We don't need to mention what year it was, but I was celebrating like I always do.
No, I don't even know, so it doesn't even matter to me. That's even the best part. So I've known you, as most people on this podcast, for a long, long time. And I may tease the podcast tomorrow by posting like, a hilarious picture from the New York days.
Oh God. Can I approve?
Of course.
Okay.
But also, you're going to be back there. If you're chilling, let's bring this over here.
I'll be more comfortable.
So one thing I know, since I've known you for a minute, is that everybody in the industry knows you as the boss executive for a number of years. But I know that you had a career as an artist prior to.
Mm-hmm. That's so funny.
But it's real.
There.
Yes, this is where we're starting.
Okay,
we don't need to start.
We're taking it all the way back.
We're going there. So first.
Wow.
Did you have what was your rap name back then?
God. No, we cannot start this.
Yes, we can.
We can't do that.
Why?
That's like...
What was the rap name?
I'm actually not going to do that. I can't do it.
Okay, we're not.
But at one point it was just Nikki P, which a lot of people call me.
Yeah.
And actually still call me to this day.
Yeah.
So that was...
Okay, so we'll go with that
one that I don't mind saying.
All right, so we'll go there.
Yeah,
I mean, I've had
any of the names I had were actually given to me by other people. So they weren't names that I chose. They were kind of, other people kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in that space, at some point, you made a decision to make the shift from in front of the camera to behind it.
Yeah.
We've never talked about it. Like, what made that? What shifted it? What made that happen?
I would say, it was a number of different things. It was, I think that I fell into wanting to pursue being an artist. I don't think I ever, just one day, kind of made the formal decision of, I don't think I thought to myself at a certain point that this was what I knew I wanted to do, and I kind of said to myself that this is what I'm going to do by. I didn't commit to it.
Yeah.
I think is really what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
I never really committed to it. I fell into it. I gravitated to it. It was it was just organic. It was something that I literally just kind of started doing. And I realized based on the reaction that I was kind of good. And certain things led to just being able to kind of showcase it more. I continued doing it into college. But I would say it was a number of different things. I still saw myself as someone who was going to pursue kind of a more traditional career path. or I don't think I thought I was going to have to choose one over the other. I think I was just I was kind of going after everything simultaneously. You know, on one hand, I like the artists. I like doing what artists do, you know, like writing and sometimes like performing. But I was also a good student and was, and I think a big part of that was definitely just during that time. I don't think we had as much information about how to pursue a career in music. And it was, and I think that also just coming from my you know, with my background, my dad's Haitian, so I'm first generation. And
So you don't have options.
Yeah, I mean, basically.
So you're going to get this job.
Yeah, I mean, anything other than doctor, lawyer. I mean, you know, this is a very common story. But anything other than a doctor or a lawyer or something along those lines was not even a real career. Like, don't even bother talking about whatever that is. So I think that was definitely ingrained. And I don't think I thought it was I didn't see it as stifling because I did think, you know, I was a good student and, you know, I wanted to go to law school and it felt like, okay, that feels right. So I was kind of just straddling, you know, like I'm taking my political science courses, but I started interning at a label and I was like, okay, I'm going to intern in the business and legal affairs department. I kept trying to figure out ways, I think, to bring it together in some way.
So when you started interning at the label, were you thinking of it as this is a way that I'm going to get my music in?
I was thinking about it in again.
What was the dream?
I was literally
we all have
thinking,
this delusional idea of I'm about to do this and then this is going to happen.
Right.
So like what were you?
No, I mean, the crazy thing is I was doing it to somehow I found a way to have this qualify so that I could do it and get credit for this class, you know. So I did it in order to complete, you know, one of my courses. And I think like I really thought, you know, probably entertainment law felt like something I should consider pursuing. So I was kind of feeling it out, testing it out. But on the other hand, I was still going to a friend's house who was a producer who lives in Brooklyn, recording my demo. And I also thought, oh, I'm in the building.
Yes.
So I am here. So once this demo is done, all I have to do is go upstairs and you know, hand it over to whoever and see what happens. So that was also like, I mean, it's funny because I'd never actually, this is the first time I'm actually, I think, like articulating. So that's why it sounds like, I think in my head, I literally had just like these two things going on. It was like two-pronged, but they were never defined. Like right now I'm actually like saying it, but I think that's where I was with it. It was, okay, this serves its purpose. And if I end up, you know, this sets me up potentially for this entertainment law path. Let me see how all this works. But on the other hand, I'm still continuing to do this artist thing. And I guess I just thought I could, you know, go down both roads until something made sense. And I think that's really what I was doing.
Did you get the demo done?
I think I did.
Did you slide it on anybody's desk?
You know what? Okay, so I think what ended up happening, I will say, like, I was really busy. I was, just school was you know, was pretty demanding.
Yeah, you went to NYU.
Yeah, it was demanding. I was interning. I was working. So I have to say, I think the artists, that side, you know, I just became very focused. That school, as we know, is not, it's expensive.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, I was like, if I'm going to be here, I need to graduate with good grades. And so I think the artist thing kind of started to just become less of a priority. And another factor was one thing about working at a label. Once you work there in some way or another, what you realize quickly is that nobody wants to hear that you're an artist.
Yeah.
right? Well, actually, now if I recall correctly, I think I did actually let my boss know that I was an artist, and the reaction I got was, oh, kind of. It was one of those like, oh, another one. Oh, it wasn't well received. So it was kind of a sign to me that I shouldn't be too open about it. I should be discreet and kind of do this thing on the side. But I think that reaction actually like really, without realizing it, kind of affected me. And I think also, so that was one thing. And I think also just being exposed to like working in the system, I think just being exposed to what I was exposed to, I think I became interested in just how things worked on that side. And I think I just saw myself probably being able to get somewhere if I pursued things on the more business
allowed you to have your
supportive.
cake and eat it too,
Yeah.
because you could have a
Be in it.
9-to-5 job, but then have all the trappings of the
Yeah.
art,
I mean, I didn't really
entertainment.
want a 9-to-5, but I wanted a way to, when I say traditional, just something, well, I didn't want it, but I think I felt like, okay, that's just something that felt at that time particularly, I just don't think I was necessarily open to the risk that was involved, And and again, like a huge part of it was, like was that voice, from my parents and, my dad. I mean, they literally, were still asking me when I was going to grad school, they asked me that question up until I was 30. You know what I mean? So even after I had been working and, my career, I'm 8 years into my career.
I don't know if that voice has left me yet. There still is in a lot of the things that I do, there still is definitely the voice from, it's not just a voice. It's obviously you grew up hearing certain things, but then it's also just like you understand really a level of sacrifice that they did to make it here to the country. And then to also obviously provide to be able to go to, especially when you go to like a good school, because there's loans and whatever
Absolutely.
else. And
yeah.
But I just went the total opposite direction and just said, no, I have to do this
well,
artist thing.
And I always say, I will say that I don't regret not pursuing being an artist because I've, now having been in this industry, if that's what you want to do, you're going to do it by any means possible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what your parents say. It doesn't matter whether when you hear the stories of I slept in my car, I slept on a couch, I, moved with $50, whatever. I'm like, I didn't do that. You know what I mean? Like if if I wanted to do it, I would have done that. Yeah. Period. So just from that point on, and I mean, and I can be realistic with myself. It doesn't mean that I'm not willing to sacrifice. I mean, I think I've sacrificed a lot just by pursuing what I ended up pursuing. But it just meant that for whatever reason, and it wasn't conscious. It wasn't that I said I'm not willing to sacrifice, but if I didn't do it, if I wasn't willing to have my parents probably, potentially, I mean, I don't want to say disown, but.
Yeah. But to get back to your other point, like, I've been talking about this with a few other artists and a few other artists that are mentoring some younger artists. And this question does come up, this whole idea where literally it's like, what can I do to be inspired to practice more? What can I do to be inspired to, do whatever? And then you don't want to tell them the reality is just like, if you're not doing it, you're not going to do it. Like if it doesn't burn inside you, that when no one's looking, when no one's paying attention, you're not sitting there in the corner writing rhymes, producing, playing drums, learning, new scales and bass, whatever.
Right.
It's that is a fundamental to
100%
to chasing this, because you will that will be the only thing you can come back to when you are sleeping in your car and you're like, no, but I have to do this because this is built in.
Yeah.
But for your time as an artist, when you shifted, I guess you didn't really shift. It was a fairly smooth transition. But as you moved into different roles within the industry, did you feel like that you had a bit of an advantage, or did you take something from being an artist that you were able to apply into the business side 100%. Of things?
I mean, I think that, I think I'm definitely able to empathize with artists. And I think having been one, I think, you know, I'm not just approaching, you know, I'm creative. So in terms of being able to understand, like, I can empathize with the artists, you know, and I feel, I mean, I'm just able to relate to them and speak the same language.
Are you able to translate that out to the people who are maybe not artists, more business side?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably what I think that's where I come into the picture. You know, I think that, you know, I didn't necessarily pursue being an artist, but I think that I also believe in things making sense, and I believe in figuring out how to execute things. And for me, it's very much about how seeing something and figuring out how to present it. You know, how do we present this or capture, you know, what it is that's special about you, and like, what's the best way to put that out there in some form or fashion. And I've always, you know, gotten excited about talent, and I've always wanted to support talent. Like, I think something else I was doing in college, again, without even having any idea of what this was, but when we had shows, when we booked shows at, you know, at NYU, that we would have like assign, you know, like an established artist, and then we would have supporting artists, and there would be like, you know, some local talent. If I was excited about someone, a lot of times I would end up connecting. Like, there was a particular group where I was, you know, cool with them. I became cool with them, and I thought that they were dope. And I'm like, and I just naturally felt like, oh, more people should know about them. Yeah. Like, that's how my brain was working. More people should know about them. So I'm going to call some other colleges and see what events they have going on and see if they'll book these artists. I didn't know what that was, and I had nothing to really gain from this. But again, it was, for some reason, I felt like, oh, these guys are dope. Like, we, you know, they performed at our school. Like, this makes sense. They should do this at other schools. And at that point, just after even just doing that little bit, they asked me to manage them. And I didn't do it. I don't remember why. I don't know if I had a specific reason. Can you mention reason. What group that is, or who are they called? Oh my God, because I still know one of the guys because he's a DJ out here. Oh, okay. Rise and Shine. Are you familiar with them? It's two guys from Brooklyn, two rappers from Brooklyn, and they kind of, you know, had a little bit of buzz. They, I think, ended up signing a Raucous at some point. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, they definitely had there was some traction going. But yeah, and that was, I knew nothing about that. You know, I didn't. So I think that that's very natural for me to just feel like, see something in an artist and feel like I want other people to see what I see. And that's literally what I do now. Yeah. The same exact thing. Yeah. That was the thing that you were doing when nobody else was paying you or paying attention to you. Just right. Like, yeah. Exactly. And so that's something that I think I've always, that's been the thing it's been consistent. I'm doing the same thing right now, except obviously in a different capacity and just the role, in a different role, but like at the core. No, that's awesome. Yeah. So you've been in a ton of different positions, and
variety of companies from the publishing side to the label side. What are the labels getting wrong? And what are they getting right as well? But we can start with wrong. Do you think that there's a fundamental that they don't still yet understand?
I mean, I think at this very point, because there was a period of time where majors were reluctant to let go of what they knew, and to just accept that things are different and that you're going to need to make the necessary changes and evolve according to what what changes have taken place. And so I think that was what was wrong at that time. But I think now the reality is that I think that there's a realization and there's an acceptance that there's different kinds of artists. And you have to kind of treat the spectrum of different artists accordingly. I mean, obviously there's certain artists and we know what different artists are going to kind of deliver on. We know this artist occupies this space. This is going to give us the single and maybe be a little bit more trendy. This is going to be the career artist, and they're going to require whatever that's going to require. And they require different, different artists require different approaches. Yeah. So I think that there's a better understanding of that now. I think, majors all labels need to make money, but I think that ultimately that's a challenge,
Do you think that it should be smaller boutiques that kind of like can service those kinds of artists? Whether it be Capitol is not like this, but all the way, but where you have something like a Blue Note that you know that you can have, these.
Where I am right now I think that we're in a good place because the reality is that the industry right now is in a continuous state of evolution. Yeah. That's what we all had to accept, is that we're not going to reach this point where, okay, now we figured out what the new model is and this is what it's going to be. That's not what it is. It's continuously evolving. And I think that it always has. I mean, it went from, vinyl to cassette, each period of time. But I think obviously now it's, the biggest transition I think would be streaming. And I think that we've all had to, it's, I don't know if it's recalibrate, because we're like continuously trying to do this, And so I think that at an independent, I'm currently at an independent label at Rostrum. I think we have the freedom to be flexible and nimble, and literally we talk about this every day. Like, we have different artists that have different needs and who are breaking in different ways and who are at different places and different spaces. And so we have to treat each one accordingly. So we kind of can't put everything through this, specific system. We have to figure out, okay, where is this artist right now? What do they require? And how do we continue to push this forward? How is, and we do try to figure out, like, at least to a certain extent, have like different categories so that we feel like, and not formal categories, but at least kind of like, okay, well, this is how things work for this particular artist, and this artist is probably comparable. Yeah. Their path is probably comparable. So, we can maybe reference how things went in that particular case. So we might have like case studies. Yeah. But I think, if the question is what have they gotten wrong? I mean, I think the biggest thing that's going to be detrimental is just not understanding that you have to be open to evolving. I think it's a lot more difficult in a larger company because there's so many pieces that get affected. You can't just be nimble. It's like there's a lot more red tape. One thing affects the next, the bottom line. There's just so much more to consider and so many.
Is that what led you to make the jump? Like, did you, when, you were at a pretty large company prior to?
Well, I was at BMI, which was Performance Royalties.
But it's still pretty big company in comparison.
I mean, what led me to the jump was the role I had there was good for a few years. It was good for me for a few years, but ultimately it wasn't what I wanted to be doing or what I saw myself doing. The positive was that I was, working with all the writers and producers and all the talent in LA. So that was great. It just put me like right in the middle of all that was going on. And that was, and it was a great time to do that in LA because there was a lot of up and coming talent. Yeah. Everyone that has, popped over the last few years, they were all like ground level to a certain extent. So, Kendrick sat in my office, for a meeting with Top and Dave. And like, I literally, just sat there and told them about BMI. And like, I would see them all the time out, just whatever shows were going on. Like, there was a whole community of artists that were bubbling at that time. It was a great time to come to LA and just kind of, find yourself like in the middle of all that was going on. And so I don't regret any of it. I think it was good. It was beneficial. I built a lot of great relationships, but I'm creative. And so what I ended up doing, I mean, it was the kind of position where it was what you made. It was what you made of it. Am I saying that? So I had the freedom to do a lot of different things. You want to help the artists, people wanted exposure. So I was able to put on a showcase. You help connect dots. You meet a writer, you meet whatever producers, you're like, oh, I know who you should go in with. I know who you should work with. So you're ultimately, you're doing more than connecting dots. You're applying your creativity. But you're doing it and you're helping a lot of people, but you don't have an invested interest. The amount that you're able, your involvement is limited.
Yeah.
It's limited. And it's also like what you're contributing. It might just be an intro here or a suggestion there, but that's value because you have other people out there getting paid to do those things and getting paid well. Yeah. And that's when it started to feel like, okay, like it's time to make a move. Yeah. So, and for me, I knew that I needed to do something that I needed to do what it was I actually wanted to do because even BMI was adjacent to what I wanted to do. Okay. I came into the business because I wanted to be an A&R. Yeah. Like, period. I said that I knew that from the moment that I knew what that was, an A&R was. As soon as I read, found out what it was, that's what I knew. So when does that happen, to jump back a little bit from interning in the legal space? I would say so business and legal also, I was in the A&R admin department and that was under business and legal. Okay. So once you knew what I was in the A&R admin department. So, I'm doing everything from transcribing lyrics, doing credits, just like all of the admin in conjunction with recording that, what's happening alongside recording the albums. And just, I'm exposed to I was always into producers. I was always, again, I was a music head. I was the girl listening to underground radio. I was a super hip hop head. So I paid attention
Y'all had a great radio station too.
Yeah. But, and I was listening to like, Stretch and Bobbito and, Hofstra Underground and Adelphi Underground and all that stuff. And I read credits because I really got into sounds and I really got into recognizing like, I recognize different producers and their sounds. And again, something I just naturally got into, I had an appreciation for it. And so once I realized that there was a job that or
Did
this
all that.
yeah and I just remember reading about certain people. I remember reading about Shantae Page, who was at Motown. I don't know if she knows this. If she listens to this, she'll know that she was someone that I remember reading an article about, and just learning about what she was doing at the time and who she had signed. She had signed, I think, maybe, I think Music Soul Child, or maybe, I don't know, or D'Angelo. I can't remember right now, but
The Kedar era.
yeah. And then obviously, my favorite artist at the time was Nas and Faith Newman, reading about her. And just, once I found out what that job consisted of, I was like, oh, this is me. This is what I want to do. And so I always made that clear from the beginning. And yeah, I took a lot of jobs that were adjacent to that actual role. It's obviously not an easy role. Yeah. It's not, you don't. The way in is so arbitrary.
Extremely weird and complicated.
There's no track.
Yeah.
There's no you do this, this, and this, and you're in. There's so many entry points to that job that I created situations for myself. I managed artists. I managed producers that brought me as close to that role, or that allowed me to be to be involved in the A&R process as much as possible without necessarily being an A&R.
You're almost getting the education without the check.
Yeah. The advice that I always give people is, if you want to do something, don't wait on someone to give you the title. Start doing the job regardless. Start doing the work.
Bars.
Yeah. Yeah. Because managing a producer, at that time I was managing Omen in New York. I was listening to his tracks and I'm figuring out what artists it makes sense for. And then I'm pitching to the A&R, the tracks that I would narrow it down to and pitch it to, find out what projects were open and set up meetings and pitch it to all those A&R. So that's part of the process, or I'm in the studio with him and artists are coming through and I'm exposed to what's going on there and, part of the conversation and giving my input. And then managing artists, same thing, getting music. I was managing at a certain point. Do you remember? Oh my God, you do remember Takia.
Oh, of course. Shout to Takia.
Who, I think she was ahead of her time.
We still have to, I still feel like we made some amazing records. But yeah.
Wow.
So to even move into that space.
We've known each other for a long time.
We have. And you've been in many variations and many random apartments of mine. Whatever desk I had that we had to make records on.
These people are always, they always were a little bit too early. Because Takia, she was a beast. Nola Darling are now.
I just talked to Alex.
And they didn't get it.
I just talked to Alex the other day.
6 years ago, people were like, why are they wearing beanies and why are their shirts buttoned all the way up? And now,
so much.
They were all black girls before that became cool.
So that's breaks into two questions I want to ask you. So, it's the one thing that most people don't realize, which is, this is going to be a random tangent story, but it was like when I was working out here, I was working at T-Mobile. And that was my entrance into the industry, selling sidekicks to people.
Okay.
And, through a couple whatever people, end up hanging out with Just Blaze. And I remember coming to an epiphany. It was probably like studio. It was myself, Lawrence, and Mars, like 1500 or nothing. He was working on something and I was just in there, just kind of like soaking up as much information as possible. And I remember like driving him back to the hotel, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then had to go to work in like an hour. And I was just like, I remember being in the car and be like, oh, so this is how people win. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, you have to go this hard for as long as you can And eventually you hope that the timing catches up to you to kind of where you are.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't, but oftentimes I think that the more that you continue to go down the path, the longer that you stick it out, those things start to assemble.
Right.
And people kind of get it. But in talking about Nola Darling and talking about Takia, what are your feelings now on, 2019, and we're in Women's History Month, like where women in rap stand today? Like, how do you feel about it? Because it seems like this explosion, but then it feels like, I don't know, I'm cautiously optimistic, but, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that one of the challenges that we faced prior was there were very specific categories, and you had to fit into one of those few boxes if you were going to be a female artist, and particularly a rapper. You're either hood chick, you're sexy with, and half naked, or you're conscious, you're either the next Lauren or you're the next Little Kim.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, which one are you? And other than that, I don't get it. Not only that, most of the A&Rs, were men.
Yeah.
And so, I remember very early on when I couldn't necessarily be, well, I think, like for instance with, what I realized is that a lot of these artists were packaged in the, from the perspective of men. Mm-hmm. What do men want? What do men want to hear? And what men thought women wanted to hear. And that's what I was always hearing. Men telling me what women wanted to hear, which I thought was hilarious. I'm like, wait, I thought,
yeah.
wait,
so
I
actually
am a woman, so you're trying to tell me what, okay. And this was actually all happening, And I remember with Takia, my whole thing was she's the rapping female, the rapping Mary J. Blige, because, she's, just authentic. She's, around the way, relatable, like, I was like, that's who she is. And I'm like, why can't it, Mary be, why can't the rapping version of Mary exist? Why is there not a place for that? So that was my thinking. But I mean, when I tell you, and I think I also have to laugh because I'm like, wow, so I'm a female manager managing a female rapper. So I'm like, what are you thinking? And I'm sitting here pitching this girl, and we're trying to get tracks, and we're, taking meetings with A&Rs. And it's like that's what happens. I didn't even realize what I was up against.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I will say is that I was definitely kind of like, this is what I want to do, and I'm just going to do it. And I didn't find out, it took time for me, even now, I have to say this Me Too conversation. There were so many things that were just kind of intrinsic and that you just felt came with this industry, and it was normalized, that you didn't even kind of stop and like identify the moments.
How were you grappling with that? As I have a lot of behind the scenes conversations, and you are the first woman on this podcast. So I figure we can talk about it now, where it's just like, yeah, there was, coupled with what the regular environment allowed during the eras that we were coming up from high school on.
Yeah.
Then adding the layer of what the music industry thought was commonplace. Like, how do you square, I guess, going through all of, that with kind of the reckoning that's happening now? Like,
yeah. I think it's almost like, I think to a certain extent, I definitely had a certain level of naivete, because I just said I just made a decision that this is what I wanted to do and I was going to do it. And there was no reason why I couldn't do it. And I didn't think I'm a woman.
Right.
I didn't think I didn't get that position or this didn't happen because I'm a woman. I don't think that ever crossed my mind up until when did we start talking about it? Like last year, 2 years ago, where I, and it's not that I was ignorant, I mean, we learn about all of this and I mean, I'm a pretty conscious person. I stay informed. I think I fall under the woke category. You know what I mean?
Certainly.
Or under that.
Yeah.
But I think that you still you just don't really kind of think about just how in your day to day. I mean, now I'm very, very aware, just literally in my day to day, like how I need to navigate as a woman and just like what I'm very aware of the experiences that I'm having and how I'm experiencing things as a woman, just everything from, I mean, what I know as what I realize now is like, when someone thinks A&R, first of all, people say A&R guy, just from the top. Let's start with that. When somebody thinks of an A&R, they don't imagine a woman. Yeah. And so I knew, what I was experiencing when I would, I was in the studio and people would walk in and they'd shake everyone's hand but mine because they thought I was someone's girlfriend. Yeah. I knew that. I mean, I noticed that clearly. I was aware of all those moments, but I don't think I was thinking about the fact, like how that affected my career, or how that was going to affect, or how at that time it was affecting my just like my career path, my ability to advance career-wise. That just, I'm already up against this idea that, when I walk in the office and I'm having to prove to the person, in their mind, they're like, why does she even want to be an A&R? It's not like, what are you going to do as an A&R? It's already like, oh, she wants to be an A&R. So that I'm starting from, my starting point is different.
But you have a pretty spectacular and pristine and solid reputation in the industry. Do you think that, whether you call it naivete or just like you had your blinders on for your goals, do you think, though, in the end that benefited you, especially for that time period? Because you knew you can speak to this about obviously things that you weren't going to do, just regular general, like, fraternizing in the workplace sort of stuff that is commonplace in the music industry, but it's just like, I'm not going that route. But by not feeling slighted by an A&R telling you, mansplaining to you how you should be hearing your own female rapper, right. By not, not feeling intensely, offended by that, but allowing you to then move on to the next step and move on to the next step. Do you think that in the end helped you to get to where you were, and helped you to get to where you were, where it wasn't like, and this is going to be fucked up, but that like other people didn't look at you in the industry as a problem, or, if I say the wrong thing to her, she's going to react this sort of way?
Do I think that was... I mean, I think that I'm... You're going to edit this part?
Go.
I take like 20 minutes?
Take the 20-minute pause. You didn't even have to. You got to think. You got to do it. The silence is the best parts of the podcast.
I think that on one hand, it's good that I wasn't discouraged. But I think that on the other hand, I think there's what you have to learn about any any environment or any space that you are working in, that there's obviously going to be, other, there's, what is it I'm looking? Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the word I was going to use. Politics. I mean, it's just, you have to be strategic and know what you're up against, I guess. You have to know what you're up against. You can kind of be tunnel vision and, have your blinders on and say, I'm going to do this, but you have to understand the environment that you're in, I mean, that's important. You have your goal, but can you achieve that if you're not aware of, like the variables and what's around you and how you need to go about making things happen. And I think that's, it's not just doing your own work. And I think that, on one hand, you might think, I'm just going to do what I do and I'm going to be really great at it. And it's going to speak for itself and it's going to get the attention that I know it deserves. And that's your thinking, but that's cool. And you should absolutely feel that way and think that way and believe in what you're doing. But you also need to be aware of, like I said, just, the environment, because you need to outsmart it, know what you're dealing with and know how to, just how to outsmart it. That's the only way you're going to get anywhere with what it is you're doing.
Yeah, because something we had touched on before the everything started recording, which was the idea that everybody involved in helping things succeed or being a part of team building, everybody's going to have their own agenda too. So it's not
100%.
It's not just what your agenda doing. Is. It's like, oh, okay.
It's finding out there's a whole other set of things that you need to be doing. I mean, obviously you can't do anything on your own. So what you need to do is you need to find people whose agendas and the things they're interested in align with yours. And that's important, because whatever it is you have to offer it's only going to be valuable to someone where it, in some way works with their program. Yeah. So, and especially at that time, because mind you, we're talking about a time where we didn't have SoundCloud. There
was no SoundCloud. Yeah. There was MySpace though. Yeah,
MySpace, and we took advantage of that in the beginning, and that was cool. But we didn't have Instagram and we didn't have SoundCloud, which I think we can speculate all day long, but I think it would have definitely made a difference with some of the artists, with some of these artists.
No, agreed.
And so relationships mattered even more. It's different now. Yeah. You don't even have the gatekeepers. Now at this point, it's the audiences are determining where the value is, And so, but at that time when I was coming up, the quote unquote gatekeepers and, all those relationships, they mattered.
So
yeah,
back to the question, which was hilarious because it's, so you're feeling on female artists today.
Yeah.
Do you like what you see? Do you?
I think that there's
feel like something, especially female rappers specifically. Do you see some interesting things going on? Do you think we can get to a point where we can have more than one, winning?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're experiencing that now.
We're close, but I still feel like there's this inherent battle where it's just like, oh, now you're up. There's two at the top, but they're fighting for this position that they shouldn't have to fight for at all.
Yeah.
And then all the other women that I see coming up, it feels like they're either going to try to jump right in that lane. I don't see that much. When we talked about how there was a lack of diversity, you still had very distinct artists, if you're talking about someone like Lauren, Missy, Lil' Kim, Foxy. Though they felt like they might have been similar, they were still distinct enough that
Right.
they were their own sort of
Right.
things. Trina.
Right.
So it's like we had that era and Eve, when we go back to it, you're like, oh yeah, you had all these individual voices and individual ideas that all were doing all these very different things. We've not been able to replicate that, even though I feel like the talent is out there. And so I'm wondering if you think that we can get back to a point like that. Because it feels like if there's going to be a time that it's going to happen, this is like the best time to kind of take advantage of it. I just don't know if.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter what, although times have changed, the industry is still going to be the way it is. So when something is successful, what happens? Everyone else wants to find their version of that. And so as much as, doors have opened and, now obviously Cardi B she's where she is. She's at the top. I mean, now that opens it up to whatever other
Cardi B lights.
Yeah, whatever other girl is, killing the, who might come from a similar space background, Instagram, personality, stripper, I mean, and that's, that's the nature of this business, is that when something's successful, people go in and people want to find their version of that. And so I think that might make it a little bit challenging, because I think sometimes in this industry, people don't necessarily understand why that particular person, like what in particular made them successful. So they try to find versions of, and don't realize that is just because that person looks and might act similarly, that's not the same thing, But I think that is, people are keen to, or their eyes are open to, they're looking for something that fits that mold. And I think that it still functions, it still kind of creates the same situation where people aren't necessarily, they see someone else come in who doesn't fit the mold, but who does that. Another female rapper comes in, but who isn't,
from the same.
a mini Cardi, and they might not get it, because they're so focused, they're hyper focused on trying to find their version of whatever they think is successful right now.
It's such an interesting thing that we continue to do this.
But I think, again, it still goes back to
But I don't think it's an industry thing. I actually think it's a business thing.
Yeah, it goes back to the fact that it's still male dominated. And I still think that, it's still a matter of, these women being placed in boxes, and there not being an appreciation for the fact that there's all different types of women who are talking about different types of things and who are going to have different audiences. And it's not about finding that one. It's about the fact that, there's a huge female audience out there, and, we like different things, and we're going to gravitate to different types of women who are talking about different types of things. And so everyone doesn't have to be, part two of what is currently hot, that there's room for another type of an artist who looks nothing like her and is talking nothing like, who is nothing like this girl, but, who can be equally successful. Yeah. But I think, again, it's very, I do think that has to do with, it still goes back to the people who are signing and who are signing the talent and who are out here looking for the talent. They're not necessarily going to be, they're not going to,
they're never going to get it.
Yeah, they're not naturally not going to know why this particular woman is going to be, could potentially appeal to, or could be successful, because she's not speaking to them.
Yeah.
To that person.
And it's so interesting because,
so you're just kind of trying to find like a similar product.
It's a weird conundrum that we always have, because women so often support all of the artists, from the pop stars all the way down to up and coming rappers, R&B stars, all of that sort of stuff. They are such a large part of the population and a large part of getting artists over a hump of interest. That there is still this that people still don't actually understand the audience itself.
Yeah.
But in talking specifically about music and about being a woman in the music industry, since we're in the current space, in the current climate,
Yeah.
can you separate art from the artist with everything that we have going on?
Like in what? Oh, you mean
In all of these, without naming names.
Oh my goodness.
Without naming names, is there? Yeah. Is it something that you can do? Because it's when I go back and listen to the music that I grew up on.
Yeah.
I'm just like, this is the most ridiculous misogynist madness
completely.
that was happening. But all of my homegirls obviously bopped their heads and grooved to it in the same way and emulated so many of the ideas and the fashion and the dress.
Totally.
So it's like, so you have all of that going on. And now we're in, obviously, in general, an awakening as a society. Can you separate it now, or is it too in your face to be able to do so? Because back then it was kind of just like, maybe you didn't know, or maybe you just thought it was what it was, but now it's just like everything is front and center.
It's really tough. Are you referring to
Talking about
content, or are you referring to like
artists and their artists and their allegations. Artists and their allegations. So let's go both ways.
Yeah.
You have artists that have their allegations and their art. So that's the first phase. Second part is yes. Because let's say those are the extreme cases. There are many cases that are not that far from them, but maybe considered not as extreme, that have existed through the entire, music industry. And so it's like, if we really separate and take those out, then you have all these other weird little scenarios, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be, underage, whatever. Like, there's all this sort of stuff. There was this gray area that we were living in for a very long time. In both of those cases, when the extreme ones, do you just cancel them, including the music?
Yeah.
And then what happens to the ones where there's a little bit more gray area?
I mean, it's tough. I don't really have the answer because I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, but personally for you.
I personally, I mean, when it comes, to certain specific, situations. I mean, I'm just going to say names. I mean, but, like in the R. Kelly situation, I mean, it's so troubling and disturbing that I can't separate. I cannot separate it. And listen, I love. I mean, I still love the music. Yeah. I mean, he's a genius, a musical genius, and no one can deny, his talent, his catalog. It's undeniable, but, you definitely listen to it with different ears now, knowing and being aware of a lot of what he was actually talking about and where that came from, what the source of the inspiration was. So that's very troubling. So that definitely affects the whole listening experience for sure. But I can't, I pretty much, I think that's canceled right there. I think, it's tough because if we're going to start with this, with kind of holding people accountable and having this now be a part of now, our, like, people's behavior playing into whether we're going to allow ourselves to enjoy like what they do in the entertainment space, I think that's really tough because that once we pull that list out, like
It's a long list.
we don't have much left
Yeah.
in terms of entertainment, music, film. Yeah, I mean, we don't really have much left. And so I think it's really tough. I think, you know, there's some behavior that's like it's so extreme that I think just as a person, you're just so, like I said, it's so troubling that you just like, I don't even want to enjoy this, you know, like it's not that difficult, but I think it's tough. I haven't really kind of settled on how I feel about it because I think that, interestingly enough, art has always been, you know, it's an outlet for people who are, you know, often for people who aren't able to kind of sometimes function in society or who are dealing with whatever issues they're dealing with, you know, mental illness, you know, whatever, like art, and this is across the board, all different mediums. So it tends to go hand in hand. You know, there's certain, now in these particular cases, we're talking
extreme cases,
pedophiles, you know, and that's inexcusable. So in these cases, yeah. And then you have other cases where, you know, it's other behavior, whatever that might be. But so I think we're going to find a lot of cases where many of the people that we consider to be talented and brilliant and contributed to culture in some way or another, that if we dig a little bit deeper, or if we actually just spend, you know, we focus and we find out a little bit more, we're going to be a little.
Yeah. Can you bring up a good point, which is, can you really even have artists without having this weird gray area that they're going to play in society that isn't always going to line up with what we deem as right or kosher or anything? And what do we do in order to, it is a question to figure out. I'm going to answer
it's
either.
tough. I mean, you know, you have some cases. I mean, mental illness doesn't always mean sick. Now, I mean, sick as in like, you know, again, this behavior is just sick and inexcusable and you're affecting other people. And now, you know, they're left to deal with what they now have to deal with as a result of your behavior, you know? So it's like, yeah, I mean, we have to figure out where the line is. I mean, I draw the line when it comes to that type of, you know, pedophilia, any of that. I'm just like, I can't.
Yeah, I don't know. I've found myself moving in these weird places. I agree with you that I feel like all artists are going to be crazy, but are going to be different and interesting in a certain way, because that is their purpose. Their purpose is not to be on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
Their purpose is to be somewhere in between.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can allow that to negatively affect other people.
Right.
And I feel like for me, that's kind of where I've kind of drawn the line. It's like, if you're seriously negatively affecting other people, if you do it to yourself, it is what it is. But when you're seriously negatively affecting other people, I think that's kind of where the issues lie.
That's a good line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still, you know, it's a weird thing, but
yeah, I feel like every time we find out about something, we have to keep kind of wrapping our heads around it and like readjust kind of what our lines are.
We are in uncharted territory as a society, and I don't know if anybody, you know, going back to my not original, but first couple podcasts, and I always try to restate this. We don't know what we're doing. There is no version that has worked that we're trying to aspire to. Like there is no like, oh, we're just trying to get to the working version of that thing and then we'll be fine. This is all made up.
Yeah.
We're in uncharted territory. We have 300, let's say we're just talking about America. We have 300 million people in a country that are multicultural, you know, all immigrants pretty much, except for the Native Americans. And we're trying to govern all of these people with a set of rules that we think can apply to as many as possible, but will definitely never cover as many people as possible. Then things are changing all the time. Information is instant. Opinions are instant. You know, I don't think people really understand what, you know, if there was a law that everything is the Wild West now. Like in the Wild West, you like barely had the sheriff in your town.
Yes.
And you had one dude that tried to hold everything down. And he's just like, no, the law is you can't kill people. And it's like, oh, word. And then you just walk away. It's just like, wait a minute. Because the sheriff couldn't handle all of these things at one time. I feel like we're in this space now where we're bending the agreements that we've had up until this point. And because of that, we have to look at it all in a totally new lens because we don't know what the fuck, you know, is going on. Like even when you talk about the, you know, the in the pedophilia space, right? Obviously, I think in talking about that very specific case, we know it's an extreme case. But we also know, I went to high school and I know a ton of 15 and 16-year-old girls that were dating dudes in their 20s.
Right.
And that was just normal.
Yeah.
You know? Mm-hmm. And so now if we're only talking about 2 or 3 year difference, now you're just like, wait a minute, what about those guys? Yeah. Those guys just went on to do whatever. So, you know, like, yeah, we're in this really weird space and I don't think that we yet have the tools to properly
handle this information.
And handle it, all the information. Because, you know, what I've realized too is what happens online in terms of cancel culture, in terms of all of this sort of stuff doesn't necessarily make it offline. You know, there's some guy in Arkansas right now or in Georgia where the law is that you can be with that a 16-year-old girl is legal, and he's sitting there with his 16-year-old girlfriend. Like, that's crazy what they're doing to R. Kelly. Huh? Right. No one thinks anything is.
It's true.
You know, so it's a weird and confusing space. Can't even think about the world right now. But to bring it back to the music space.
Yes.
So then, what's your advice for women, young women entering into the music industry and all of this madness that's going on right now, and, you know, advice that you can give them to help navigate it and get what they want to get out of it and get to the positions? And
I think it's a different time. I think it's actually a better, where as women, I think you're in a better, it's a better time for women, because I think there was a time where you literally had to demand respect. You had to convince people of your value. And those were just the things just before, even like as you're walking through the door, the things you had to contend with. Whereas I think what I would say now is recognize what your value is. I think there's a lot more kind of backing it up, just because there's so much more information out there and so much more kind of supporting information that, you know, it lets people know that just that what the value is in the female perspective. Right. And that our input is valuable and our presence is valuable. So I think that I would say own it, you know, own that. Know that that's what you're bringing to the table, that alone. And that's something that you actually shouldn't take for granted, because crazy enough, we're still in a time where there's not enough of us in these rooms. We're still underrepresented. So, but yet we represent a very important aspect of, we represent a huge customer base. We represent, so there's value. And so we need to own it. And not to say that we represent every single woman in the world and don't carry that, you don't need to carry that, but just know that there's value there and don't underestimate it. And you don't have to, and own being a female. Whereas, there was a time when I think a lot of women tried to figure out, how do I downplay my femininity so that I don't have to deal with certain interactions. Whereas now I would say, I think you should, you should own it. There's certain things that just as women, certain qualities that we have, and again, certain things we bring to the table, and those qualities are valuable, and we should know that, I have that and you're not going to have that. So, you're not going to maybe notice, whatever that might be.
Right.
So
Doubling down.
Own all of that. Yeah. Own it. Own being a woman. Own what comes with that. And I would say, this is one thing that people, that's kind of, there's been a few articles about this, just the value and the power in the connection between women. I think, once again, there was a time where women felt they need to compete because there's only so many slots. Whereas we're in a time right now where, there's actually a lot of value in forming and forging relationships with other women and sharing information and talking to each other about what it is you want to do, what are you working towards, what your goals are, and working together, because together, we can make things happen. So we have to support each other. We have to collaborate with each other. So I think definitely just working together, being open to that, and like I said, collaborating, I think is something that I would advise women to do, because. Yeah. What else? I don't know. I'm saying all of this off the top of my head right now, but
it's all good. It's all good. You're trying to inspire the youngins.
Yeah. And I mean, and then it always goes back to just, work, just do good work.
Yeah.
No one's going to hand anything to you. And, even if you, for whatever reason, are able to, no one's going to hand anything to you, and continue to be creative.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then lastly for you, because this is the last question.
Okay.
I'll finally let you escape. What are you still trying to accomplish? Because I know you're not done.
Yeah, it's interesting because for such a long time, my goal was to be an A&R. Mm-hmm. And it sounds so funny because it's like, okay, well, why? I think back now to just the different times in my life where I made certain career decisions, and, I took positions that were close to the job, but wasn't actually an A&R. That wasn't the role. Where, that wasn't actually my role, but I was as close to it as I could possibly be, in some way or another. And I think, so I've reached that, I've accomplished that. I'm there now, and I really like it. Like, I like what I'm doing. So, there's, for many years, my wheels were always turning, and it was always about, and I was always working on something, a side project or managing or building this, developing that, it's part of who I am. Yeah. And I'm always going to be doing that. My wheels are always turning, but it feels a little different now because I think the things that the reason that I would kind of create these projects for myself was to create an outlet, a creative outlet for myself. And so now I'm actually doing it at work. Yeah. And so I don't kind of feel that pull. I do feel the pull, of course, to like kind of have ownership, over and really be able to do something that's in the, that's a reflection of my point of view, and my perspective. So, I think it's figuring out what that's going to be, like in what form. And I've thought about different things. I'm not going to talk about it here.
Yeah, you don't have to. You got to keep when it's time, it's time.
Yeah, when it's time, it's time. But I do have some, ideas forming, and I think I feel good about them. So, yeah, it just has to be right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. Was that an answer?
There. That is a perfect answer. Ownership.
Yes,
That's the next phase.
Right.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks
you
for having me.
And I don't think you said anything crazy to get you fired, so I think we're good.
Yeah.